So as far as creating work for yourself, you really just got to put yourself out there, I think, and do your best to try and create something it's about creating. Really, that's what we're here to do. It's about creating.
Yeah.
And however you want to do that, however you feel you can contribute to the arts and to people wanting to come back to theatre or movies or music or singing, whatever it is, I think you just got to put it out there. Be brave and put it out there any way you can.
You're listening to the Theatre Thoughts Podcast. My name's Justin, or you can call me Stin. On today's episode, we're returning to the opera with Shane Placentino to discuss what exactly it is a revival director does. Shane holds an extensive history in dance with the Sydney Dance Company and behind the scenes with Opera Australia, and now he's chatting exclusively with us about his next project. Don't forget you can follow all of our news, reviews and giveaways on our socials. Follow us on Instagram at TheatreThoughtsAUS, TikTok at Theatre_Thoughts, or on our YouTube channel. So as usual, sit back, relax and switch on those thoughts for a new episode of the Theatre Thoughts Podcast. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Theatre Thoughts Podcast. We're introducing today a man who's had a wide range of experience in both ballet, dance and the opera, currently working on the revival of Madama Butterfly, which is coming to the Opera House from the 29th of June to the 30th of July. Please welcome to the podcast, Shane Placentino. Welcome.
Hi, Justin. How are you?
Good, great. Actually, yeah, it's really, really good day today. You know, real positive mood.
Yeah, me too.
Excellent. So you're currently in rehearsals with Madama Butterfly for Opera Australia. How's things going?
We haven't exactly started rehearsals yet. I'm in preparation mode for it. We start rehearsals on the 6th of June, and so I'm really keen to get into rehearsals.
No, this should be really good. I'm going to be honest, my experience with opera is still relatively new. The first opera I saw was Turandot at the Opera House this year, and I was wowed by it, in all honesty. I went and I was like, you know what? My goal for this year, for 2022, was see an opera. Finally see an opera. Not fan of the opera. I need to see like a proper opera. So I went to see Turandot and I was gobsmacked. I was absolutely gobsmacked by it. It wasn't like, I thought I'd be held back that it wasn't, you know, in English. It didn't matter whatsoever. And just the amount of like spectacle that went into it, I was shocked. Do you normally find that with people who are new to the opera scene?
Definitely. I mean, it's opera is grand in all its scale, with the voices, the music, the orchestra, the sets, the lighting. The amount of people alone to put on one is huge. So I think when people come to see the opera live, it's such an all-encompassing, immersive experience. And it does leave people gobsmacked a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating experience. So I definitely would go again. So I definitely am keen to see more. Let's quickly talk about you and your background then. So you're the revival director of Madama Butterfly, which you also worked as the assistant on the premiere of this production created by Graham Murphy and Janet Vernon in 2019. So you've had experience with it before. And you've just revived, now I'm going to butcher this name and I'm so sorry in advance, Lohengrin? That's
Damn
right. Second time. Excellent. In Melbourne. And then you worked with Jonas Kaufman in the titular role. Now he's high demand, in a high demand tenor. What was it like working with him?
Phenomenal. I was worried, little old Shane from Adelaide working with the greatest tenor in the world at the moment. But really, his legacy is not only going to be just his singing, which is phenomenal on its own, but him as an artist and a collaborator and very, very lovely man who did anything I asked him to do. He really was, as long as we're making the story clear and as long as we're, pushing that story, he was willing and able and absolutely lovely. So his legacy as an artist, I think, is going to really be up there with his singing.
Yeah, fascinating. So, and I like what you said, like little old Adelaide me. So actually on that, so let's look at your background. So you've had extensive experience with the Australian Ballet School and the Sydney Dance Company. So you graduated from the Australian Ballet School in 1990 and you were accepted into the Australian Ballet in 1991, and then you joined the Sydney Dance Company in 2002. So what was that always your dream, to be a dancer in all these massive companies?
I don't know if it was early on when I was a wee lad in Adelaide. I don't think I really thought so much about joining the Australian Ballet. I just really enjoyed going every Saturday morning to dance class and just doing my thing, really. It's lucky being the only male amongst all these females, so you get sort of a lot more attention than and then everyone else. So I liked that attention, and so I kept going, really. And then as I kept going, several teachers said to me, "You're really quite good at this. Maybe you should think about auditioning for the Australian Ballet School." And I thought, yeah, sure, I'll audition. And then the form that came with the audition was you could tick this little box that said audition only. For experience only. So that meant that you were just doing the audition for experience, but you wouldn't really go. They wouldn't think of you as going.
Oh,
so
okay.
Because I wanted to do year 12. I was finishing year 11 and I wanted to finish high school. But 4 or 5 weeks later, I think I got a letter in the mail. That's when, it's before emails.
Yeah, before, yeah.
And and I got a letter in the mail saying, "You've been accepted into the Australian Ballet School." And I asked around, and I was the only one, not only the only boy, but I was the only one from South Australia to get in that year.
Wow, that's massive.
And so I thought, you know what? And my parents, who were totally supportive, we all sort of thought this is too good an opportunity to pass up. So little did I know, I tied up loose ends with my high school, and I jumped on a train and trained it to Melbourne. And started the ballet school there in 1988, which seems like forever now.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
So that's sort of, as far as dreams go, once I got into the Australian Ballet School, then, the goal was to get into the Australian Ballet Company and then to try and work my way up the rankings there as high as I could. And after 10 years at the Australian Ballet, which was phenomenal, I took a little bit of a break and then decided to join Sydney Dance Company. Or they had an opening, actually, and I was filling in for someone. And then everything went really well and ended up staying at Sydney Dance Company for about 7 years.
Is that where you met Graham Murphy?
No, I actually met Graham Murphy at the Australian Ballet. So I think it was 1992, 93, something like that. Graham was doing his version of Nutcracker for the Australian Ballet. And actually, I just remembered this story recently. We were he was about to create the Sailor's Dance for the Nutcracker. And we were standing around in the rehearsal studio, and there were about 7 of us. And he said, "All right, who wants to go first?" And we all looked at each other, and me being the precocious youngest one there, I said, "Yeah, I'll go." And so away we went, and he was choreographing on me way back then. And I loved the experience. He's such a wonderful choreographer, let alone, and creator, that and so lovely to work with that, that's where we first met. And I did another one of his ballets called Beyond 12 while I was in the ballet. So I knew that he's somebody I wanted to continue to work with, and Sydney Dance Company just was the right place at the right time, and continued my dance career.
Well, for those who aren't sure who Graham Murphy is, he's one of the leading directors in Opera Australia's repertoire, and he was the artistic director of Sydney Dance Company from, I believe, 1976 to 2007. So very, very long time. I think he did something like 50 works or something, even more in that time. So his wealth of experience is it's a massive amount. He's
an encyclopedia. He's a creative encyclopedia. And not only that, he is very sharing and caring, and he gives you quite a lot of information, but he also wants your ideas and thoughts, and he is very collaborative in that regard. And he's been like that ever since I've met him as a dancer, and now on the other side as his assistant, and even as a person and a friend and a mentor. He's been very generous, extremely generous, and I owe him, a lot.
Yeah, I think it's always good to have that mentor or somebody that is there to guide you, especially if you're, changing careers or even just progressing in a career.
Yeah, and it's funny you should say that, like changing a career, or should I say the death of your dancing career.
I was going to ask you about this. Yes. Yeah, I was going to ask you about this because they say in dance you die twice, isn't it? That's the saying. So what was your story in this?
Well, after 10 years with the Australian Ballet and roughly 7.5 years of Sydney Dance Company, my lower back just decided it decided rather than me, decided it's enough. I was getting back spasms and I have 3-level disc degeneration in my lower back. So that mixed with a lot of partnering and lifting and, just the nature of physical contemporary dance in particular, it became too hard to maintain my body. And I had to give it away. And that was, I didn't think I had a problem with it. I decided to go back home to Adelaide for a while. And that's when it really hit home that I wouldn't be able to perform anymore. Well, I didn't think I'd be able to perform anymore. And so I missed the camaraderie and the friendships and it's a tough lifestyle, getting up every morning, doing class rehearsals and trying to stay positive even though you're exhausted. So that part I didn't miss, but I did miss the mixing it with everyone and also the being on stage and dancing for an audience is quite phenomenal, especially in those huge art centres and Sydney Opera House places, Lyric Theatre in Brisbane, and Adelaide and Perth, everywhere. We went all around, let alone internationally as well. So I'm extremely lucky, but I did mourn the process of not being able to do that anymore.
Yeah, definitely. It would have been a grieving process, isn't it? I know a lot of people went through that, recently with the pandemic. You do go through that grieving process of loss, and I don't think people recognise that in theatre.
No, perhaps not. I think, no. Well, maybe they do in theatre, but in other work, I think it's a little bit, I don't know, maybe it's easier to transfer some of the skills you have in maybe an office job to other office jobs, but it's not necessarily in dance in particular. We have those skills of self-discipline and artistry and creativity, but that's not necessarily easy to transfer to an office job, I don't think. But
yeah, exactly. Like if you're moving out of theatre and that would be the hard part for sure.
But anyway, I managed to move on, which is great.
Yeah, well, actually, let's go on to that. So this was in 2015. Opera Australia asked you to assistant direct and choreograph Faust. Is that correct?
Yes. Actually, it went just slightly before that. Graham actually, when my back injury happened and I said, listen, I can't dance anymore, Graham got wind of it and he asked me to assist him for his opera, Aida, way back in 2008. When I was stopping dance. So I did that, and it was part of the opera conference, which is where all the opera companies in Australia put money into a production and it travels around Australia. Opera Australia administer that. And so I found myself in Perth with Graham and Janet helping to put on a massive Verdi opera, Aida, which is, huge. Mm. And that's where I started, really. And it went from Perth to Melbourne and Sydney, Brisbane and Adelaide. And I put it on in all those places. And then there was a bit of a lull for a moment. And then, Opera Australia contacted me to ask if I could revive or assist reviving Faust. And I think it's because it has, 10 female dancers and 1 male dancer. So the dance aspect is really where I had a leg in the door. And that was also part of an opera conference production. And it went around the country as well. So it wasn't with Graham and Janet, but it was a different opera. And I learned a lot from that too. It was a fantastic experience.
The word is out, the Theatre Thoughts Monthly is here, and it's your chance to get exclusive giveaways, podcast episodes, reviews, and more direct to your inbox. Don't wait until next month. Get this month's Theatre Thoughts Monthly now. It takes 2 seconds to sign up. Simply head to the link in this episode's description and select the Theatre Thoughts Monthly option to fill in your details. It's that simple. You'll receive links direct to this month's edition of Charlotte's Cheap Thrills, early access to an exclusive giveaway only for Theatre Thoughts subscribers, and the early goss on our next massive star on the podcast. Now, let's get back to today's episode. So, because you're currently the revival director on Madama Butterfly, could you briefly explain the difference between a revival director and a director? Because I know Graham is the director himself, but what's a revival director? Is there a difference between the two?
Yes, very much so. So the director is usually the creator and the person behind the original ideas. And the director would work with the lighting designer, the set designer, costume designer, in this case, a content designer for the LED screens. And they would put it all together, and he would sort of be the conduit between all of those departments, plus the singers and conductor as well. So as a revival director, I need to bring all those elements together and do the same thing, but without changing or minimal changes to the production, and try and realize Graham's initial vision for the opera.
Right. Okay. Yeah. See, isn't that funny? Because I always just assumed like a revival director was you were directing something that was already like being done, and you just were like restaging it. So that's interesting. I love learning all these new things. With theatre, it's so multifaceted. There's so many things in theatre that you can just kind of learn.
Yeah. I mean, there is an element of, because we get different cast. You can't do exactly the same thing on the previous cast or the original cast, because you've got to let, I think, artists want to do their own thing, but you have to, I believe you need to allow them to own the production as well, because at the end of the day, I'm not up there singing or performing it. They are. So if they have input that they feel is valuable and it helps to make the story clearer, and they own it, then they're going to want to do it more. And so that's really my job, is to maintain Graham's vision, but to incorporate and include the people that are performing into that vision.
So with Madama Butterfly, could you give us just a brief one of your little spiels about Madama Butterfly? So give us the highlights.
Well, this particular production is fascinating because it's set in a dystopian future, and it's about a sailor, Pinkerton, who travels to Nagasaki and wants to enjoy the geisha of Nagasaki, and marries a geisha called Madama Butterfly, or Cho-Cho-san as she's known in the score, and they marry and fall in love, and really Pinkerton jumps back on the boat and heads back to America, leaving Cho-Cho-san there by herself with her servant. Well, not by herself, leaves her there with Suzuki, her servant, and the son that Pinkerton had left behind. And so really that's the basic premise, except for the end, which I guess it's no spoiler alert, but when Pinkerton does come back, he has an American wife, and he's there to really take his son back to America with him. And this is devastating to Cho-Cho-san or Madama Butterfly, and she kills herself. So, and that's the end of the opera. It's not the most uplifting endings, but it's a beautiful setting that happens around it.
Yeah. Actually, now you said that, this is another thing I find interesting about theatre, because that was just screaming Miss Saigon to me, like beat by beat. And I was like, hang on a second. I can see where someone's had a little bit of inspiration.
Exactly. I mean, Miss Saigon, it's based on the same story, in the same sense that Rent is based on La Boheme, and those sorts of some musicals are. What's the other one? I think Traviata with Moulin Rouge as well. So there's many similarities, and I like how they make them different takes on these stories. I think it's fascinating, and also I've I've done the ballet of Madama Butterfly.
Oh, right. How was that how is that different in as your role on it?
Yeah, well, it was done in the Australian Ballet in the mid-90s. I think Stanton Welch created the ballet. And that was my first foray into it, actually, without the singing. So it was an orchestrated score by John Lanchbury. And I'd never heard the original opera before. So that was my first take on it. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful. The music by itself is phenomenal. And I played the role of Goro, the little sort of marriage broker that gets Butterfly and Pinkerton together. And he's a nasty little character, but also really fascinating. So, it's interesting. I always find it interesting to see how other people interpret these classic stories.
Yeah, I think they're very malleable, and you can really change them and do a lot of stuff with them. Well, for those who are going through like a theatre transition, or they're being forced to leave a world that they've worked in and been passionate behind, what advice would you sort of give to them to help them make opportunities for yourself, especially in such like a smaller section of entertainment in general, I suppose?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because I don't feel that I'm particularly good at it either. I think, especially post 2 lockdowns, and post COVID, where the arts community or the arts sector is slowly gathering back its momentum that it had pre-COVID, and the audiences are just starting to come back as well. But it's taking a bit of time, and I think as audiences come back to the theatre, more opportunities will come back as well. But I've been extremely lucky in that Opera Australia have given me a lot of work, even post these COVID times. So as far as creating work for yourself, you really just got to put yourself out there, I think, and do your best to try and create something it's about creating. Really, that's what we're here to do. It's about creating. Yeah. And however you want to do that, however you feel you can contribute to the arts and to people wanting to come back to theatre or movies or music or singing, whatever it is, I think you just got to put it out there. Be brave and put it out there any way you can. And you'll be surprised at who may come knocking at the door.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that's great advice, especially, and I've said this like many, many times on this podcast. I love that we are like slowly gathering speed, and people have been stewing in lockdown. They've been creating, and I'm hoping that we have like a renaissance.
I should actually take my own advice too, and put myself out there a bit more as well.
Yeah, I'm the worst at it. I sometimes like, oh, should I do? And maybe it's the lockdown effect having its.
Well, it's a brave person to really, when you create something and you put it out there, you're putting an element of yourself out there, and so it's open to criticism, and so it takes a hugely brave effort and a brave person to put yourself out there.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, Shane, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. Madama Butterfly is playing at the Sydney Opera House from June 29th to July 30th, and you can get your tickets at opera.org.au. Thank you so much, Shane, for jumping on and having a chat. I think that was really enlightening. And I can't wait to see where else you go.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure, and I can't wait to see where else I go as well.
A massive thank you to Christy Sedham for helping to organise today's episode. Thank you as well to Shane Placentino for joining us on the podcast. Opera Australia's Madama Butterfly plays from the 29th of June to the 30th of July at the Sydney Opera House. Tickets can be booked at opera.org.au. That's it for another episode of the Theatre Thoughts Podcast. If you're looking to see more theatre in 2022 and consider yourself to be a writer, why not join our growing team of reviewers? We are currently on the lookout for new writers in Sydney and Melbourne to join our team. You'll gain great experience in writing reviews and expressing your opinions, plus you get to see theatre shows on us. If this sounds like you, email us at theatrethoughtsteam@outlook.com or by contacting us on our website, theatrethoughtsoz.online. And we'll see you next time here on the Theatre Thoughts Podcast.